Hi, you guys caught me. Whoops. Sorry about that. We're live once again, and today's inauguration day. So there's a lot of competition for words and messages and so forth, as we all can imagine. I'm really excited about today's show. I was just talking to Terry a little bit ago. I just hope we're both, energetic people, and I hope we don't start raising the roof there. As I told you before, we've got a couple of more guests coming up. We're about, I think, like 2 weeks out on bookings now, which is great. I'm having to get more and more organized, which isn't great, but it's making me do my thing because I really dig doing this, and I really appreciate your guys' support and everything that we have. So once again, I'm Rod Duff. I'm from Insights and Straight Talk, an IMS company. And again, Barbie, producer Barbie's out actually checking out the inauguration right now. She's out in California. So I'm going to be bringing on, obviously, Terry Tucker. I can't wait for you guys to meet him. And Janelle on the Lost and Found. There's 300,000 missing kids. Her sister, she went through that live as her sister, as a child, disappeared. So that's a tragic event. And then I've got a number of things that we're going back and forth on some investing strategies. You remember I had on Mike Volonic a little bit ago, and this is a competing type of strategy. All right, so that's it. With great joy and eagerness, I'd like to introduce to you a gentleman who has, we were talking earlier, and he has a background that's fascinating, and pushing a rock uphill. In life, sometimes you have to do that, but he's created a message and a lifestyle by that message that is that's very resonating. And so with that, I'd like to introduce, there we go. I'd like to introduce Terry, Mr. Terry Tucker. How you doing today?
I am great, Rod. Thanks for having me on. I'm really looking forward to talking with you.
Yeah, like I said on the thing, you probably heard me in the green room or where I gotta keep settling down because I've got to chill, and I'm over pumped right now. So take it away, Terry.
Sure, I'll give you a little bit about me. Born and raised
Please.
on the south side of Chicago. I am the oldest of three boys. You can't tell this from looking at me or from my voice, but I'm 6'8" tall, and actually went to college at the Citadel in Charleston, South Carolina, on a basketball scholarship. When I graduated from college, I moved home to find a job. Rod, I'm really going to date myself now, but this was long before the internet was available to help people find employment. I know. Can you imagine that?
Oh, yeah.
I mean, I was lucky. My first job out of college was in the corporate headquarters of Wendy's International, the hamburger chain, in their marketing department.
Nice.
That was the good news. The bad news was I lived with my parents for the next 3.5 years as I helped my mother care for my father and my grandmother, who were both dying of different forms of cancer. After Wendy's, I actually went to work for the hospital that cared for my father and my grandmother. After that, I made a major pivot in my life, and at 37 years of age, became a police officer in Cincinnati. Part of what I did during my law enforcement career was I was a SWAT hostage negotiator. After that, started a school security consulting business, coached girls high school basketball when we lived in Texas. But for the last almost 13 years now, I've been battling a rare form of cancer, a rare form of melanoma. And then finally, my wife and I have been married for 31 years. We have one child, a daughter, who's a graduate of the United States Air Force Academy and is an officer in the new branch of the military, the Space Force.
That's neat. That is neat. What a story. I mean, what an American dream, a life you've led. short of, some tragedy and ongoing tragedy, you've led a life that is the picturesque, the American dream.
Yeah, I mean, if you're not going to live, I mean, why be here? There's a guy by the name of Ed Milet, an entrepreneur, 2023. I forget who named him Entrepreneur of the Year, but he talks about the 4 types of people that we encounter in our life. And he says the first group are the unmotivated. He said that's the vast majority of people that you will come across. The second group he talks about are the motivated. And he talks about that being a sort of carrot and stick approach to life, where if I do this, I will get that. He says it's kind of low level, but it works for a lot of people that have a very happy and successful life. The third group he talks about are the inspirational people, where the word inspiration coming from 2 words, in spirit. So if you're an inspirational person, you move people with your energy. And then the last group he talks about are the aspirational people, where people aspire to be like you. And sometimes if I get the opportunity, depending on the group I'm talking to, I'll tell that story. And it'll be like, all right, show of hands, how many people are unmotivated? Nobody raises their hand. Nobody says they're unmotivated in their life. But if you believe Ed Milet, the vast majority of people are. And I think so many people are. They don't live the life that they were put on this earth to live.
Why? What's the from your experience, what is the reason? And do people ever, I know this is kind of a basic question, but do people ever move from one group to the other? And does that, is that something that just you grow up with then, and then you kind of create your arc, or what's the background of that?
I think a lot of people don't even look for their purpose. And, if you don't believe me, believe somebody like Viktor Frankl, who was a Holocaust survivor, wrote Man's Search for Meaning. And in that book, he talks about that we should not live our life in the abstract, that every one of us was put on the face of this earth with a purpose, with a mission, with a why, whatever you want to call it. But so few
I've
people,
noticed that,
I think, live that. And I honestly, Rod, I think the biggest reason is fear. People are afraid of what's going to happen. And I know I've done this in my life. When I wrote my book, I dedicated an entire chapter to most people think with their fears and their insecurities instead of using their minds. And I don't know about you, but I've done that in my life. I've been wanting to start a business or get involved in a project, and you kind of pull back and you're like, oh, wait a minute. Maybe I'm not smart enough, or maybe I don't have enough information, or what will people say about me if I fail? That's thinking with our fears and insecurities. That's not thinking with our minds. And whenever I get a chance, especially when I talk to young people, I always tell them, if there's something in your heart, something in your soul that you believe you're supposed to do, but it scares you, go ahead and do it. Because at the end of your life, the things you're going to regret are not going to be those things you did. They're going to be those things you didn't do. And by then it's going to be too late to go back and do them.
Yeah. Yeah. I like how you say you're put on this earth for a purpose, and, you got to find that purpose, and you hear that periodically, but it's interesting when you look back and realize you're starting to do that now. What are some of the motivations for you moving forward? I know you've already had a accelerated life and a very thrilling life. What keeps motivating you now today, and it as advice to people out there on ways to move from one group to the other, or become that one group,
Absolutely. And I think the first thing people need to do is understand what their values are. What is foundational in your life? What is important? What is something that no matter what the world does, no matter what direction the world moves, you're not going to move? Because if you can find those things, whether it's your family, your faith, whatever it ends up being, you can anchor your life to those things because they're immovable. Nothing, no matter where the world goes, you will be grounded with those. So I think understanding your values is the first thing. And then the second thing I would say is, what are you good at? What are your unique gifts and talents? I mean, if you told me, Terry, you're going to be an accountant, I would probably fail miserably, and I would probably be miserable while I was failing miserably, during that. So understand what your strengths and weaknesses are and play to them. We used to always tell our daughter, my wife and I, what are you good at? Play to your strengths. That'll make you happy in life. So understanding your values, then what are you good at? And then, and Rod, maybe you can speak to this, because I've done this in my life, where, like, we say, okay, by the time I'm 28, I want to be making, I'm just making this up, $100,000 a year. And by the time I'm 35, I want to be married and I want to have a couple of kids. And then we get to those arbitrary mileposts that we stuck out there, and we're not there. And we say, oh my gosh, I'm a failure. I haven't done what I'm supposed to do in life. There's a guy by the name of Jeff Wetzler wrote a book called Ask. And he says, look at life differently. And I wish I would have known this when I was younger. He said, look at life in terms of decades. So in your 20s, he says, do everything. Do everything that's out there, everything that interests you, even mildly. Make all kinds of mistakes, screw up all over the place, not for the sake of making mistakes, but for the sake of what you're going to learn. And he says, then in your 30s, find those 2 or 3 things that really motivate you, that really uplift you, that you feel you're supposed to do. And he said, then in your 40s, when you're more mature, you're more established, you understand kind of how life works, find that one thing and dig into it. And then he says, in your 50s and 60s and beyond, you can reap the rewards of what you did in your 20s, 30s, and 40s. So I would suggest that's a good place to start for your audience in terms of looking for and finding their purpose.
Yeah, I've come up with an epiphany. Like that's one of the reasons I've been so excited about this show when we started talking, because I shared a story with you and so my life has become more reflection. I am starting to reflect more on my life now than I ever have before, because I didn't do the things that you're talking about, what you just talked about in your 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, and 60s now. And it's fascinating because I and correct me if I'm wrong here, okay? It seems to me that the way our society is, and I'm this is a show for the middle class, right? And it's all the messages and insights and so forth for the middle class. I've come to realize that at least a great number of people don't do what you're talking about, but on top of that, they start going down that path while they have that it's humdrum. We are human beings. We should start really looking, and that was a fantastic concept of, when you're 20, go do everything. I did that, and then I went the safe route, right? Mm-hmm. So I'm now coming back full circle, and what a lesson that I've taken out of hopefully to pass on to other people, because I'm halfway through now, so I got a little bit more time to go. What do you think?
Yeah, I remember when my dad was dying of cancer, he turned 50, and it was like, oh, you're over the hill now. You're halfway through. But I heard a statistic just the other day that said, so the average life expectancy is 76 years. So middle age, if you think about that, is 38. It's not 50. And and it kind of scared me. It's like, holy cow, I'm 38 years old. Well, I'm not 38, but when I was 38 years old, that was the midpoint of my life. And where was I at 38? Not where I expected to be, certainly not where I wanted to be. But the other thing I'll say about this, Rod, is very few people take personal responsibility for their own success and happiness.
Oh yeah.
I've seen so many people, and you probably have too. You own a company and things like that. It's like, people start down a road towards a goal, and then an impediment gets in their way, and they're blocked, and they can't get over it, around it, or through it. And so they quit, they give up. And we don't just give up though. Now we got to blame somebody. We got to blame our parents or our station in life or our teachers or our boss, whoever it is. And when I got cancer, it was so funny. I'm like, okay, I get cancer. And people are like, well, who do you blame? I'm like, what do you mean? Who do I blame? It's like, who do you blame because you got cancer? And I've had all 88 genes tested that doctors either know of or suspect cause every form of cancer that we're aware of. And I have absolutely no mutations in any of my genes that would predispose me to any form of cancer. But yet I have this incredibly rare form of melanoma. And people are like, well, you got to blame somebody for that. I don't blame anybody for that. Why shouldn't I get cancer? What makes me any more special, than my neighbor or, somebody at the grocery store or something like that? What makes me not, you shouldn't get cancer, Terry, because you're what? What? Because I got a college degree, because I got a master's. What's the arbitrator there? And so I use my cancer, and faith is a very important part of my life. I use my cancer now as, okay, God, use my infirmity, use my malignancy to show people your goodness, your love, your power, your influence, and your healing. So I feel I'm being used by something that's much bigger than me right now.
Yeah, I and that epiphany comes from what you've been battling now, right? Yeah, I know exactly the feeling that you're saying there, because like I said, I know now what my reason for being here is, and because of my faith, and also because I shouldn't be here. Why am I alive? Because I have still work to do on this earth, right? Before I go meet my my maker and so forth. Let's think. There's a lot of questions coming up. Do you want to just kind of field we sort of have already.
Sure.
Let's see what this. Can you share a specific moment that changed your perspective on life? I think we talked a little bit about it, but why don't you fill that in a little bit more? We've kind of just been streaming on the surface here. You want to get into a little bit,
Absolutely.
Deeper?
Yeah.
Okay, so let's hit that one.
I mean, I think the thing that certainly the most recent thing that has motivated my life, my father dying, when I was 24 years old, being my hero, that was a very hard time in my life. But for me, it was 2012 when I had found out I had this rare form of cancer, and I was told I'd be dead in 2 years. And I thought, oh, okay, well, you gave me a death sentence. I thought maybe I could try to turn that death sentence into a life sentence. And, you talk about your faith, and, there was a point where I was on a medication that left me terrible. I had terrible flu-like symptoms for 2 to 3 days every week after I took it. And I took those weekly injections for 5 years. So imagine having a terrible case of the flu every week for 5 years. But as my doctor said,
Jeez.
Sorry, Terry, that's not a cure. We're just trying to kick the can down the road. And Ron, I really felt sort of there were two camps. There was the living and the not dying. And I was definitely in the not dying. I didn't feel I was living at all. But that eventually, at the end of that treatment cycle, I ended up in the intensive care unit with a body temperature of 108 degrees, which is usually not compatible with being alive. But somehow I survived that. And then during the COVID pandemic, I found out I have tumors in my lungs. I still have tumors in my lungs. And I had to have my left leg amputated above the knee. And I remember after that.
Tumors in your lungs from the COVID, or you just
from the cancer?
Okay.
Yeah, it had migrated.
It's in the lungs too.
Yeah, it started on the bottom of my foot, and it is now, I have tumors in each lung. But I remember my oncologist showed me my CAT scan. And Rob, I don't know how to read a CAT scan. I haven't been to medical school or anything like that, but you can look at it and be like, oh, well, that sure doesn't look like it belongs there. I had these big tumors in my lungs. I had fluid all around the pleural spaces. And I remember turning to my doctor and saying, how was I alive? And Rod, till the day I die, I will never forget this. He put his head down. He shook his head no. And then he looked up at me And he said, I don't know, because you shouldn't have been, which said to me that God's not done with me yet. When I die, where I die, how I die, way above my pay grade. I don't spend nearly as much time worrying about dying. I spend more time focused on the living. And as you said, figuring out our purposes here on life.
Yeah, I can see why you do what you do. That's an incredible story, and very powerful. I mean, even to the point where the doctor, that moment you just set up, there's a reason he said that way.
Yeah.
Beyond himself, maybe. And the hand of God touches things across people's lives all the time. Let's see if we can, what's one important lesson you learned from your journey?
I think it's this. It's more important who you work with and who you work for than it is the work that you do. Find people that care about you. Find people that are willing to invest in you. Find people that want to see you succeed, and hitch your wagon to those people and climb your mountains together. This morning, I had a good friend of ours, my wife and I, a young man who works with my wife, send me a recording. I can't remember. The artist is Ben Richter, and it's The Richest Man in the World. And it basically talks about all the stuff that we worry about, in life, money, power, prestige, influence. None of that matters. And the song is about, I've got a daughter who loves me. I've got a son who loves me. I've got a wife who loves me. That's all I need. I've got a God who loves me. That's all I need. I don't need money.
Yeah.
I don't need power. I don't need influence. Because at the end of the day,
oh my God, yes.
We're all going to be in that little plot in the ground, and all our money, all our power, all our influence is going to be gone. And let me say this, because there's a, we talked about Chicago. There's a professor at the University of Chicago, psychology professor, who does this experiment with his students. And I would encourage people to do this, whether you do it in this way or not. They go out and they get on a bus in Chicago. And the idea is, in 3 questions, you get deep with somebody. So you get down, you sit down next to somebody. Hey, how you doing? I'm fine. How are you? Question 1. Question 2. And I'm just making this up. What do you do for a living? Okay. Question 3. Or, I'm a doctor. Question 3. Have you always wanted to be a doctor? Now, no matter what they say, now you're deep with somebody. They could say, no, I grew up on a farm. I wanted to be a veterinarian, but X, Y, and Z happened. Or my mom was a doctor and she died of breast cancer when she was 40. So I'm honoring her memory by becoming a doctor. Whatever they say, now you're deep with somebody. And we don't go deep with people anymore. Social media lets us play on the surface. I love going deep with people. I love getting connected with people that way.
Yeah, that's a great story. So on the bus, people would get on a bus and just travel around and get deep in conversation within 3.
I mean, it doesn't have to be a bus. Do it at work. Walk out. Hey,
No, I wonder how that's something that you really have to. We talk about similar things. Same thing here. That's creating a vibe across the world. It's the butterfly effect. You do this here, and then that happens, then that happens, then that happens. God, I never thought about doing that. I talk about waving, saying hi to people,
Sure.
but that is a really, really good idea.
Yeah, I mean,
we
love talking about ourselves. We are. I hate to say this, but for most part, we're narcissistic. We love talking about ourselves. My wife is in the financial services industry, and, we would go to the obligatory Christmas party every year. And I used to drive her nuts because I said, all right, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to go in, I'm going to find 5 of your colleagues. At the end of the night, I'm going to come out and I'm going to tell you how they met their spouse, where they went to college, why they do what they do, how many kids they have, where their kids go to school. I'm going to tell you everything. I said, and then Monday morning, they're going to come to you and they're going to tell you what a great guy that I am, but they're not going to know a thing about me, because rarely do people reciprocate. Oh, how did you meet your wife? Oh, where do your kids go to school? Et cetera, et cetera. So,
Yeah.
and it drove her crazy because I would come out at the end of the night, tell her about her 5 colleagues, and then Monday morning, and by noon, she'd pick up the phone. She's like, all right, yeah, they all came in, told me what a great guy you are, and we would just laugh about it. But we used to tell our daughter, you want to be a great conversationalist? Go to a party and just ask people about themselves. You will have a great time. You'll learn a lot, and they will think you're the greatest person in the world.
Oh my God, I could not agree with you more. Absolutely. I mean, I see that you've really got a curiosity, and that's what people need to have. Be curious.
Yeah. I was taught that, as a hostage negotiator, that was one thing that was drilled.
Yeah.
Be curious.
Tell me about that. Tell me about how.
Go ahead.
No, go ahead. Go ahead.
I was going to say, hostage negotiator, usually your next door neighbor is not a hostage negotiator. So, it's kind of one of those things. But I remember when I first started, we were given a formula, and the formula was 738-55. And it had to do with how we as human beings communicate with each other. And I'll tell you why they gave us that formula at the end.
Oh, I know what it is.
So 7% of how we communicate a message are the words we use. And think how many times, and I know I've done this one, I wish I hadn't have said that, or I wish I would have said that differently, or I wish I wouldn't have said that at all. That's only 7% of how a message gets communicated. 38% is the tone of voice that you use with that message. Are you really excited and can't wait to tell the message? Or are you kind of down and depressed when you're delivering those words? And then 55%, so more than half, of how we get a message across is our body language and our facial expressions. And the reason we were given that formula is because if we were negotiating with somebody that, for example, had a gun and were barricaded in a room, I was not in the room with that person. I was a lot of times outside the room, sometimes down the road talking to them on the phone. So we didn't have the luxury of that 55%. We didn't have the luxury of saying something to someone
of
and
course.
see them kind of roll their eyes and be like, oh, what an idiot. I can't believe Terry said that. So we had to get good based on certainly what people were telling us, but also what they weren't saying and how they were saying it.
Yeah, that's that obviously that skill was built up while you were a police officer, right? Because they are police people are probably the best large group of people at doing that because they read your eyes. They take on those physical messages that are coming back to you, cues, that are back coming back to you. You want to touch on this question there now real quick? We'll bounce around a little bit if you don't mind. I like to do that. It's just interesting. So what the sports side, I mean, I think we all kind of know, but talk to us.
Yeah, I mean, so as I mentioned, go ahead.
Terry, by the way, I'm sorry. Every once in a while, I'm looking down because I'm trying to see the messages. I'm listening though. I
understand. That's not a problem. Not a problem at all. So as I mentioned, I'm the oldest of 3 boys. So I'm 6'8". I've got a brother who's 6'7", who pitched for the University of Notre Dame's baseball team. Another brother who's 6'6", who was drafted by the Cleveland Cavaliers in the National Basketball Association. And then my dad was 6'5". So we used to joke that if you sat behind our family in church growing up, not a prayer's chance you're going to see anything that was going on, at the front of the church. But our 5'8" mother was the boss. And so we played, our whole lives revolved around sports. We played football, baseball, and basketball growing up. And we ran track in the off season to stay in shape. But it was really our parents who supported us in all this, taking us to games, taking us to practices, that taught us the value of family, of loving each other, of caring for each other, of supporting each other. As I mentioned to you before we jumped on, both of my brothers are in education, high school education in the Chicago area. I've had a lot of jobs in my life, but if you asked me what I did, I would probably tell you I was a police officer. And my parents taught us the value of service, of giving back for all the good things that you have in your life. And I think my brothers and I have modeled that. And I believe our children as well are kind of in that same boat. They're all in service type teaching, military, in a way serving other individuals. So our parents are really, I credit them so much for what they taught. And it wasn't overt. It wasn't like you must serve people. It was we will live our lives in such a way so that you pick up what we think is important in life.
Yeah, and you framed that with the most important thing, right? You and this is kind of a two-part thing I want to throw at you here. Your family, the way you were raised, and the solidness of the people who raised you, obviously has a big deal to just defining your path. You're going to have this path because it's instilled in you, and we all know. Is that as big of a factor as anything to this motivated people, unmotivated people, and then inspirable. I forgot the word.
Inspirational.
Inspirational. So and we know a lot of people don't live with that kind of upbringing. How do you make that bridge? I mean, suggestions, advice. How do you make that bridge if you're not, which is most of of civilization? How do you bridge it?
I say this to people. It's not your fault that you were raised in an abusive home or with an alcoholic father or whatever, but it is your responsibility. It is your responsibility to take what you learned from that and make your life better. And I think we can all do that. And certainly one of the things that I always talk about in my cancer journey, and for me, it's cancer. For some people, it's being, raised in an abusive household or something like that. It's to be able to find meaning in your misery. You've got to be able to find the reason. There's reasons for everything. I don't think anybody we meet is a coincidence. I don't think the experiences that we have are just happenstance. I think there's reasons, and we're supposed to learn something from those. And I think so many people, again, like I said, very few people take personal responsibility for their own success and happiness. It's much easier to blame. It's much easier to say, well, I am messed up because my parents were messed up. Or, yeah, you might be, but not every person who experiences an alcoholic father or an abusive parent turns out bad. A lot of them turn out great. It's like I learned
exactly.
From them. So
because they had the challenges. They had the challenges to develop other skill sets. Sorry, go ahead.
No, you're absolutely right. That's an incredibly important point. What are you supposed to learn from this? And we're all supposed to learn. I mean, you talked about being curious. Curious is one of the most important qualities I think we should have in our lives. What am I supposed to learn? What can I learn from this person? Whether they're a good person or they're not a good person. What can I learn from them? One of the nurses that takes care of me related a story to me one time. She said, yeah, my dad went out in the garage, shot and killed my mother, and then went down the basement and killed himself. I said, how old were you? 5. Were you in the house? Yes. I mean, can you imagine?
Wow.
And that has shaped her life. She's in her 50s now. That has shaped her life. And I've said to her several times, it's not your fault that your dad did what he did to your mother and himself, but it is your responsibility to learn from it and try to make some meaning out of the misery you experienced.
It's funny you frame that the way you do. It's not your fault, but it is your responsibility. The difference in being able to elevate yourself, I think, is that it's not your fault, but it is your responsibility. A lot of people think it's, as a kid, that's traumatic. Yes, I see why you would say it's not your fault. But so many people don't take that bridge and say it is your responsibility, and learn from that. That is such great advice, because it's simple, it's obvious, but it's not. I mean, we're a social humans, we're social bugs. We should be starting to, like you were talking earlier, talk to people and get that support out there. I think we'll have a lot less of the uninspired, or the unmotivated. If society starts picking up the neighborhood starts picking up the world, it kind of like how it used to be, and then be able to do the right reactions because they have lessons from people they respect and respond to.
Exactly. And that's just it. Who do you emulate? Who are the people out there in your life that you say, I want to be like that person, or I like that quality in that human being? I remember before I went to work
100%.
for the hospital, I had an interview with a packaging company. And I remember I was meeting with the senior vice president of marketing. And Rod, we spent an hour and a half. And all he wanted to know is, what was it like growing up in your family? What was your childhood like? What was high school like? What was college like? And I, after the interview, I said to him, I said, I got to ask you. I said, this has been the most interesting interview I've ever had. I said, you never asked me one question about marketing or about business or my philosophy or anything like that. I said, do you mind if I ask you why? And he said, sure. He said, I've got plenty of people around me that will tell me whether or not you are a good fit for our group. Incidentally, I was not offered the job, so obviously I wasn't a good fit. But the thing I found interesting is he said, I want to hire people of good character, people who have values. And he said, I believe your character, your values are instilled in you in the first 20 years of your life. That's why I asked you questions basically about the first 20 years of your life. I wanted to hear about that. And the other thing he said to me, and I've read this at other places, but this is the first time I heard it. He said, character is caught. It's not taught. So you're not going to read a book and say, hey, I'm a person of great character. I've got great values. You're going to watch how other people do things and be like, you know what? I really like the way she handled that situation. Or, you know what? I don't think he handled that very well at all. And you learn and you develop, as long as you're open to learning and developing and wanting to understand that stuff. But I thought, oh, that was the strangest interview I ever had, but something that taught me a great deal.
Really smart guy. I mean, that is never done, right, as far as the emphasis, and it should be. I mean, it makes perfect sense when you say it. You know?
Exactly. I'd never thought of it. Yeah.
I just hearing this, and it just boom, the bells go, it rings, it connects. Hey, Terry, what techniques do you use to control your mind in challenging situations? I know I want to get into those four, as we roll into it, let's definitely keep digging a little deeper. This ought to start us out there.
Sure. So I look at it, kind of like so many things in life. If you get to the crisis and you haven't prepared for the crisis, it's hard to deal with the crisis. So how do I deal? How do I change my mind, motivate my mind, whatever you want to say? I would tell you to do this because I do this every day of my life. Do at least one thing every day that scares you, that makes you nervous, that makes you uncomfortable, that's potentially embarrassing. It doesn't have to be a big thing. But if you do those small things every day, when the big disasters in life hit us, and they hit all of us, we lose somebody who's close to us, we unexpectedly get let go from our job, we find out we have a chronic or a terminal illness, you will be so much more resilient to handle those things when they present themselves. So what am I talking about? So one of the things I do is I go for my cancer treatment every 3 weeks for the entire week. It's a pain in the butt.
The whole week?
Yeah, for the whole week. It's very uncomfortable. I shake. I have a very bad reaction to my medicine. So how do I prepare for that? One of the things I do is every time I take a shower, I turn the water as cold as I possibly can at the end, and I spend 2 or 3 minutes in that uncomfortableness. Because if I can do those small uncomfortable things when I have to go for my treatments, it makes me more resilient. It gives me more wherewithal, for lack of a better word, to handle that. It still sucks, don't get me wrong. But I use that suck, pardon my French, I use that suck to make me stronger, to make me more resilient, to be able to handle adversity better. So do small things every day, whatever it is for you. Get up 15 minutes early. I heard a statistic the other day that said a third of Americans, so 33% of Americans, admit to hitting the snooze button on their alarm at least 3 times every morning.
Wow.
A third. Think about what you
Yeah.
could do. I mean, usually it's 15-minute cycles, so 3 times is 45 minutes. What could you do with 45 extra minutes in your life? Yeah, I don't want to get up now. I know, but get up now and do something. Exercise, journal, meditate, pray, whatever you want to do. That gave you 45 extra minutes. Find those difficult things in your life and do them.
That's that unmotivated group that we were elaborating on earlier. I know exactly what you're saying with the because I've gone through those times where I just didn't want to do anything. I didn't want to get out of bed. I didn't want to, the alarm would go on. I'd hit snooze. Then I changed my mindset and maybe not on purpose thinking about that, but just got a little bit more motivated. Took one step towards the way to go took one step towards seeing life a little different, and then another and another. It's a journey through life, right, Terry?
Right. Yeah, it absolutely is. And I guess I don't want your audience to sit here and think, Rod, you're looking at me now. There is no S on my chest. I do not have a cape and fly around with magical power.
Oh, wait a minute. Before you said so. What? Okay, go ahead.
No. I have those bad days.
I couldn't resist that.
Yeah, especially when I'm in treatment. I cry, I get down, I feel sorry for myself. But I find when I'm doing that you're looking inward. You're looking, woe is me. This is terrible. I'm having a bad day. Yeah, I'm having a bad day. Okay. And I find a real simple way, at least for me, to turn that around is to go help or say hi to somebody else. I mean, sometimes I sit in the waiting room and I look at people and they've got that deer in the headlights stare. It's their first time there. They're scared to death. They don't know what's going to happen. They're afraid of the pain that's coming. And a lot of times we'll just I'm in a wheelchair, so I wheel over and I'm like, hey, how you doing? And just by somebody
that's beauty
acknowledging that, and usually when I leave, it's like, hey, don't worry. I've been coming here for 4 years. These are the best nurses, the best technicians, the best doctors. You're going to be great. You're going to have a great day. And then I just leave. I want to impart something. I want to impart kindness into these people. I can be a jerk. I was a police officer. I certainly can, rumble with the best of them. But I don't do that anymore in my life. I want to sow love, goodness, positivity, motivation back into the world. We need more of that. We can all be jerks, but we can also be kinder to each other.
Yeah, I mean that is a matter of choice. I mean, everybody has different personalities, right? I mean, we're a little more outgoing and sensory, definitely not sensory deficit. That's for sure. But and then there's people out there that are shy and different things. And
sure.
How do you? If somebody is listening to you right now and saying, oh yeah, well, that's great. I do that. But I'm scared to death to talk to people. How do people work on their sensitivities? How do they dig that out if they don't have a lesson? What advice do you have for them?
So I'll give you this story. There's a YouTube influencer. What a great job. I mean, when we were growing up,
yeah.
Who the heck was an influencer?
No.
YouTube influencer called Mr. Beast. And
Mr. Beast.
Mr. Beast, that's what he's called. And
All
Mr.
right.
Beast is fairly well known in the YouTube community. I didn't know who he was before I heard about him, but okay. And he says, I'll help anybody. I'll help anybody that needs help with their YouTube production. I'll help anybody. But he's got these caveats. He's like, before I help you, I want you to go make 100 videos. They don't have to be long. They could be a minute or 2 minutes or 5 minutes or whatever. Make 100 videos. And what he says is 2 things happen. One, most people, and again, goes back to most people are unmotivated. Most people won't make 100 videos. And two,
great point.
And two,
Sorry.
no, you're fine. And two, if you make 100 videos, you figured it out and you don't need his help. So it's kind of, it's kind of a self-fulfilling prophecy. Go make 100 videos. You'll make all kinds of mistakes, but you'll learn how to do that. So what I would tell people, if you're afraid, go do it. I mean, what if you walked into a coffee shop and, what if you walked into Starbucks and said, hey, whatever my coffee is, and hey, how much trouble would you get in if you gave me, a lemon bar? And see, I mean, people would never do, I've got to pay for that. What if you asked for something like that? How much trouble would you get in? Or you know what, you're checking into a hotel. Hey, how much trouble would you get in if you upgraded me to a suite? Asking questions like that help you, come on, because what's the worst they can say? I can't do that, I'll get in trouble. Or, hey, here's a lemon bar. It's free. Have a nice day. You asked for it. Do things that make you uncomfortable. You just do it once. See what happens. I know we all are, some people are like, no, I could never do that. You could do it with somebody that's non-threatening to you. Do it with your brother, your mom, or, it's like, hey, Mom, I know you're saving that. Hey, you mind if I just have a spoonful of that?
Yeah.
Oh, no, you can't have it. Okay. You said no. Now you realize what no feels like. You got to be uncomfortable. If you're not uncomfortable in this world, you're not growing. And if you're not growing, you're dying.
Yeah, so true. That's a really good idea too. Is start if you can't do it, if you just can't do it, start with your parents, because success builds confidence, right?
Absolutely.
So the no's are the lessons, and the yeses are the direction. The feedback to you that you're going the right direction there. And not very many people do that, do they, Terry?
I mean, they don't. And I mean, and one of the things, again, coming back from something I learned as a hostage negotiator, is a yes without a how is a no. And I mean, think how many times you get the robocalls and it's like, hey,
build on that.
Yeah.
Build on that. A yes.
A yes without a how is a no. So if I get a robocall and says, hey, I want to come out because you might need a new roof. How many people just say to get the guy to go away? Yeah, sure. Yeah. Okay, fine. That's a yes without a how.
But it's not. Yeah.
As opposed to, and it's really a no. As opposed to, yes, I'm going to have my marketing person get in touch with you. I'm going to have my financial people meet with you. Now you've got a how. Now you're going to how you implement that yes in your life. So a yes without a how is a no. I always try to go at things from the negative. No makes us feel safe. Yes kind of makes us feel vulnerable. Oh, I just said yes to this. Oh my gosh. Am I committed?
Yeah.
Is this going to cost me money? Is this going to cost me time? Whatever. What if you go at it from a no? Is this a bad time to talk to you, Rod? What are you going to say? No, it's not a bad time to. And I just let you say no. And now you feel like you're in control. Rod's in control.
That's right.
No, it's a good time. We can talk. But now I can talk to you. So it's fine. Ask questions in the negative. Ask questions that you're looking to get a no from, because it makes people feel safer.
Man, I love that. That is so true and so underutilized. Let me ask you a question. You have a skill set that you were learning as you were growing up, and you use what you know and how you are now. Quick question: how much do you think? I mean, you always hear human beings are only using 10% of their brain, right? What do you think that's something that's coming forward that'll fill things that are missing from people? Do you understand what I'm asking there?
I'm not entirely sure. No.
So if you use 10% of your brain, do you use more of it now because you have a different mindset than others may, and have these abilities to challenge things that other people wouldn't?
Yeah, I understand what you're saying. No, I don't think I'm using any more of it. I think I'm using it differently because
Okay.
And here's, let me say this, and I'll use a basketball analogy. If I took a basketball, went out onto the court and started to shoot free throws with that basketball, if you could look at my brain under an MRI, there would be a certain part of my brain that would light up, that would be engaged.
Yes, I've seen those.
The interesting thing about that is if I thought about taking that basketball, going out on that court and shooting those free throws, that same part of my brain would engage.
So your mental imaging.
Yeah. I mean, if say this part of my brain, when I'm shooting the free throws, engages, when I think about grabbing that basketball, I'm out on the court, I'm shooting those free throws, that same part of my brain is going to engage. And I say that because whether we admit it or not, and I'll admit it to myself, I talk to myself all the time. I mean, a lot of people say, they don't talk to themselves. Where you get in trouble is when you start answering yourselves. Then you might want to see somebody. But
yeah, right.
I talk to myself all the time, and I'm very careful what I say to myself. There's a former Olympic and national or international rifle competitor by the name of Larry Basham, and he teaches the Army snipers, the Navy SEAL snipers, the Marine Corps snipers, and stuff like that about shooting. And he talks about you never discuss the negatives with another person. Oh, I missed 10 free throws. You never reinforce the negative, because the more you reinforce it, the more it engages in your brain. It would be like me if I kept saying to you, Rod, I'm terrible at algebra. I'm terrible at algebra. I'm never going to do well in this. You're going to wire your brain to the point where you're right. You are terrible at algebra because you keep telling yourself that. Bruce Lee, he used to say, be very careful how you talk to yourself, because we all become what we think.
Wow. That was one very intelligent guy,
Yes.
Just in philosophy and thought and how he built what he built. It was his basically brand. Off of what you're talking about. Did we get through the 4 points that we were, I know we kind of skipped around a little bit here, but let's get back into that and get a little bit of clarification of those. I think we got most of the questions, and now they're just patting us on the back because you're such a wonderful man.
Well, thank you. Notice yeah, exactly.
That's right. Yeah. Why don't you go ahead and kind of get into that message and maybe tell us a little bit about some of the books and other things that you're doing.
Sure. So the 4 truths, the reason I'm looking down is I have them here on a Post-it note. I'm in my office. So I see them multiple times during the day, and they constantly get reinforced in my mind. And they're just one sentence each. And the first one is control your mind, or your mind is going to control you. And I think that's the crux. People used to say, is one more important than the other? And I used to say, no, they're all equally important. But the more I've read, the more I've learned, the more I've matured, I think that one about controlling your mind. And I'll tell you a quick story. When I was in college, I went to a military college called the Citadel in Charleston, South Carolina. And my sophomore year, the president was a man by the name of James Stockdale. And Stockdale had been a prisoner of war during the Vietnam conflict. He was a naval aviator, shot down on a bombing run, spent almost 8 years in captivity. Wow. And somebody asked him at an event, who were the people that survived that brutality, that torture, that ugliness? And he said, well, let me tell you who didn't survive. He said it wasn't the big, tall, strong, tough guys who thought that they could handle any kind of abuse or torture. And what he said next really kind of floored me. He said, the other group that didn't survive were the optimists. He said, these were the people that thought they would be rescued or let go by Thanksgiving or Christmas or Easter. And he said, when they wouldn't be let go, he said, those people died of a broken heart. He said, the people that survived were the people who understood what they could control, which according to Stockdale was basically the thoughts in their minds and the breathing in their lungs. Everything else was at the discretion of the enemy, and controlled it. And I think where people get off the rails, Rod, is they end up we try to control everything in our lives. We want to be, like I'm the puppet master.
Excellent point.
I find if you're dealing with a problem, a very easy way to deal with that problem is to take a piece of paper and just write down everything that's bothering you regarding that problem. Get everything out on a piece of paper and then go through that list and cross out everything that you personally have no control over. Whatever's left on that list are things that you can work on. But it also gives you I can't deal with it. I have no control over that. Get rid of that. Why am I worried about it? Why am I losing sleep over it? So controlling your mind is one important thing. The second one is embrace the pain and the difficulty that we all experience in life, and use that pain and the difficulty to make you a stronger and more resilient individual. We kind of talked about that. I mean, our brains are hardwired to keep us away from pain and difficulty.
Yeah, pleasure feeling, right?
Exactly. But if you're not in pain, if you're not outside your comfort zones, you're not growing. And as I said, you're not growing, you're dying.
Yeah.
The third one I look at kind of as a legacy truth. It's what you leave behind is what you weave in the hearts of other people. And when I found out I had these tumors in my lungs, and after I had my leg amputated, I went with my wife to the mortuary, to the cemetery, and to the church, and I planned my funeral. And because I go on podcasts and talk about this, or I speak in groups in person, I actually got some brushback from people who commented that planning my funeral was in some way defeatist. And I had to remind these people that the last time I checked, we're all going to die. As far as I know, nobody's working on a cure for life right now.
You're not going to lose the money, you mean?
Yeah, exactly. Every one of us is going to die, but not every one of us is going to truly live. And I heard a Native American Blackfoot proverb years ago that I absolutely love. And it goes like this: when you were born, you cried and the world rejoiced. Live your life in such a way so that when you die, the world cries and you rejoice. That's what I want. That's what I'm looking for in my life.
Oh yeah, so, that is beauty.
I love that.
That is absolute beauty.
I think about that. And then the last one is, as long as you don't quit, you can never be defeated. And I think that's pretty self-explanatory. So those are the 4 truths.
Wow, those are awesome. And it's like anything. You ever hear like the old wives' tale? They end up being true. The medicines and the things that have been around. This message has been around forever. Sure. It's a matter of reaching out and accepting it and taking it and going and using it, right?
Yeah, applying it in your life. I mean, there are a ton of books about motivation. Motivation's been around forever, but how do you apply it? Maybe there's a different way that you could apply it that works for you that may not work for another person.
Yeah. Yeah, that is awesome. So anything you want to wrap up with? Any last thoughts or your book? I don't know if you want to talk about, get a little bit of advertisement in there and see what's, I mean,
I appreciate that. I don't usually come on podcasts to hawk my book. I mean, it's called Sustainable Excellence, 10 Principles to Leading Your Uncommon and Extraordinary Life. You can get it anywhere. You can get a book online, Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Apple iBooks. I will leave you with this. I'm a voracious reader. I love to read. And there's a book called Farewell to Arms. It was written by Ernest Hemingway, and it's a semi-autobiographical account of his time as an ambulance driver for the Italian army, even though he was an American citizen during World War I. And there's a line in that book that I absolutely love. And the line goes like this: life breaks everyone, and afterward, many are stronger at the broken places. So it's a metaphor for life. It's just like if you were to break your arm and a doctor would put it in a cast, when that arm healed, it would be stronger at the area where it was broken. Just like in your life, you're going to experience things in life that are going to break you. They're going to beat you to your knees. But if you can keep moving forward, if you can come out the other end of that tragedy, that adversity, you will end up being a stronger human being for what you went through.
Beautiful words spoken, and truth never more important. That was so true. I mean, and kind of it goes along with, and we'll just kind of end on this. It's like, and I wanted to say this a couple of times, that point you were brought up. when you break something, it comes back stronger. That's how you build muscle, right? You tear the tissue, and then in the recovery, it becomes stronger. It's now more experienced, and there's so many things that tell us to just follow your heart, follow, where you think you should be doing versus what you have to do. Make sense?
Yeah, it makes total sense. I mean, like we talked about, when you're in your 20s, do things that interest you. You may find you don't like them, but you know what?
Yeah.
You've learned something. It's not so much the experience, it's what you learn from it. And I think that's an important point. We all think that when we get to the top of the rainbow, that's what happiness looks like. What we don't understand is it's the journey to get to the top of the mountain.
I love that.
Rainbow. The journey to get there is really what life is all about.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, Terry, I was really excited about this, and I did not disappoint. That was I think a fabulous explanation of what you do, and what you do is so important because especially we touched on it a couple of times, since the COVID, we don't talk to each other. We do a lot of things that we never used to do. And, it's not good for human society. Terry, this was a fantastic show. I really appreciate it. And I'm glad to have you here.
Well, Ron, thanks for having me on. I really enjoyed talking with you.
All right. Well, you have a good day.
You too.
Shake somebody's hand.
That's it.
All right. So, there we go. So, Terry has some lessons for us. We already know about these things deep down, but to have a reflection, to have a thought put in your head is a lot of times the thing that creates action. So I'm going to wrap up here. We're just about done. And, I'm Rod Duff. This is Insights and Straight Talk, YouTube channel, Rod Duff 1939, and you heard about Terry's book there. Let's start. It's part of the reason I started this show was because of exactly what Terry stands for. Things that need to be known that aren't, or reinforced. So go out and shake somebody's hand today. Go out and I'm going to start doing this. I'm stealing it from you, Terry, just so you know. I really like that idea within 3 questions, getting in deep with somebody. I'm going to do that. I always talk about communication. Well, that's powerful. That is powerful. With that, guys and ladies and everybody else, love you all very much. Come see us and give us ideas. I like some of these questions that were asked today. With that, I bid you adieu.